welcome back. You may have noticed I'm not in the lab today, and nor is Monty with me. That's because currently they're waxing the lab, so this week I get to do it in my office. And Monty's at home, shedding at the moment. So when he becomes all nice and new again, he will rejoin us in the lectures. But for this week, yay, office. Anyway. So, today we're going to start talking about chapter 17. So, we're going to be talking about the digestive system. And when we talk about this, there is actually an insane story of the opposite of a bromance, if there ever was one. Anti-bromance? Anyway, so let's get into it. It's interesting. But through this insane story, we have come to learn how the stomach works. Because before, like a lot of organs, yeah, you can look at cadavers all day long, but it doesn't help you figure out how they work, with a living human. Because we don't want to do vivisection, which is cutting somebody who's alive open and trying to watch everything, which is not pleasant for anybody. And that's been shown in history too, but I'm not going to go there because that's some messed up stuff from World War II. Yeah, messed up stuff. Anyway, so with that said, let's get on to a stranger story. So once upon a time, after the Civil War, there was a Canadian fur trapper, and his name was Alexis St. Martin, and he got shot in the stomach. He was down at this, this happened in Montana. He had come out of the Canadian wilderness with a whole bunch of, furs and whatnot. He traded it in for a lot of money, and he was drinking. So he was on a drinking binge with his buddies in this fort out of Montana. And I don't know exactly how he got shot. Was it a drunken brawl? Who knows? Was it an accident? I'm not entirely sure. A lot of the articles I've read doesn't seem to say, so I'm not entirely sure how he got shot, but he got shot. It was so bad that his lung was hanging out of the hole. That's how bad it was. Luckily, at this army fort, there was a doctor by the name of William Beaumont. And Beaumont was actually a really good doctor. He wasn't one of the ones that actually, would just saw off limbs and everything during the Civil War and just, pray you lived. I mean, he probably had to do a fair share of that, but at the same time, he was actually really good. He was not one of the quack doctors running around there, and there was several, anybody that could do any lick of medicine during the Civil War was put to work during the Civil War for both sides. So, which unfortunately included a bunch of quacks, sadly. So anyway, he was not. He was actually really good. And a testament to how good he was is he saved Alexis St. Martin's life, which is absolutely insane. So, like I said, this wound was, his lung was hanging out. I mean, So anyway, so after several surgeries without antiseptics and without anesthesia, which is just mind-blowing to think about, he healed. Aside from, now, some say that Beaumont left it in, or some say that's just how it healed, but he had a fistula, which is basically a hole or a window right into his stomach. And Beaumont was very much going, because nobody had really studied a working stomach before, and now he had a lovely window into a stomach. So he was going to actually take advantage of this in any which way, and this is where the anti-bromance comes in. First, he was like, well, he kept him there saying, oh, well, St. Martin, you're not healed yet, so stay with me until you're healed, and in the meantime, let me stick this bit of beef on a string down into your stomach and time it while it dissolves in your stomach. And then let me take some samples of your stomach juice, why don't you? And I send it off to a chemist and get it, actually looked at and stuff like that. So he was doing all these experiments while St. Martin was healing, and St. Martin was getting restless. He was like, dude, no, I need to go. I need to be off into the wilderness. I am a wilderness man. I must go. And Beaumont was like, here, I'll pay you if you stay around, okay? I'll pay you for doing all the handiwork around my house. So, again, St. Martin goes, okay, I get paid as long as I get paid. So it gets in and he gets paid, but basically he runs out of a bunch of things to do. So he runs out of a whole bunch of things to do for him, and he's like, "Fine, you've got nothing else for me to do except sit around and stick things and poke me in my stomach hole. I'm going. Bye." And he finally, was fed up with it all, and can you really blame him? He got up and pretty much packed up and was ready to run off into the woods again, so never to be nary seen again, because, back then, trappers, they were just out there, man. Beaumont, and this is the thing that blows my mind, because Alexis St. Martin was Canadian, Beaumont was American, and Beaumont forcibly enlisted him into the U.S. Army. So he forcibly enlisted him into the U.S. Army so he couldn't desert. And then kept him with him, had him permanently assigned to Dr. Beaumont. Yeah, so he could keep experimenting on him. It's just, okay. So anyway, finally, after his enlistment term was up, he was free, and he ran off to the woods and didn't look back. He actually had a bunch of kids. He actually got married, had a bunch of kids. Or, needless to say, the woman had a bunch of kids, so talk about tough stock. But anyway, because of Alexis St. Martin, there is up in the Canadian wilderness a plaque, actually a little stone memorial to him as the father of teaching us about the digestive system. So thank you, Alexis St. Martin, even though Dr. Beaumont kind of kidnapped you and left this hole in your stomach to do this to you. Maybe. Now, anyway, so that is the anti-bromance story of Alexis St. Martin and Dr. William Beaumont, and how basically we figured out how living stomachs work. So, yeah, weird stories. Anyway, so basically remember that you are just a giant tube within a tube, and that main tube that's going from your mouth to your anus is called your alimentary canal, or your gastrointestinal tract. And this is basically where all the digestive. Remember why we need this. We need to break down things to kind of build us back up. So if you remember going back to 168 in the beginning, we talked about how anabolism and catabolism break things down, build things up, and that's basically what's going on. We need carbohydrates, the sugars, glucose, so we can turn that into ATP with the oxygen we breathe in. We need what else? We need, DNA and RNA. We break those down into the base pairs and then use it in our own DNA and RNA. Protein. We need a lot of the amino acids of what we eat, so we can break that down into the amino acids, so we can rearrange it into proteins and enzymes that we need. And even lipids. We do need some fat. I believe, there's a story of a guy that tried to get rid of all body fat. Yeah, that wasn't smooth. Actually, all of our organs should have a nice, healthy layer of fat, because not only is it for protection, it's also for lubrication. And now, looking at me, I'm just saying, not too much fat bad, but, enough is good. You should have some body fat. That's just the way it is. You need it. Although there was this one health person that decided to try and buck against the doctors and basically anatomy and physiology in general, and sit there and say, I'm going to get down to 0% body fat and show everybody that you too can do it. And everybody in the medical world went, what? And he did that, and he killed himself doing it. His organs were pretty much shriveled little pieces of, because, you can't live with 0% body fat. It's untenable. You can't do it. Can't do it. So, remember, we need to break things down, and so that way we got the building blocks to put them back together, so that way it makes us. So we're not just doing it for, the glucose to make ATP to run our body, but we're also doing it for the building blocks of our own DNA, our own proteins and enzymes, and even our own fat. So basically, digestion is a mechanical and chemical breakdown of foods into forms that cell membranes can absorb. So we've got mechanical digestion, which breaks things down without changing them chemically, and then we get chemical digestion, which breaks them down into simpler chemicals, the monomers. Remember, the monomers make up the four major biomolecules. The base pairs make up DNA and RNA. You know, mono, you know, monosaccharides build up into polysaccharides, which are carbohydrates. Amino acids, as I said, make up proteins. So we're breaking them down to their monomers. And fatty acids turns into, later on, lipids and whatnot. So anyway, so that's what we're getting at with digestion, is basically getting all the building blocks we need to make and maintain us. Now, there's 5 parts of digestion. First thing is ingestion, which starts in the cake hole, which is also known as mastication. So the act of chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing is your mastication. Propulsion is not, sitting on a rocket and getting shot off into space, which, if you've been playing the new Link game on Switch, which is what my son's been kind of doing to himself lately, that game's a lot of fun. You can glue things to other things, and he's been gluing rockets to, everything. So, anyway. So, propulsion is actually, in this case, swallowing, which is voluntary to involuntary. It starts voluntary, hopefully. If it starts involuntary, that's not good for anybody. So it starts voluntary, you swallow, and then it turns over into involuntary as it moves it down. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then there's digestion, when it happens in the stomach with the acids and the enzymes, which is what Dr. Beaumont figured out using poor Alexis St. Martin. Then we absorb it in our intestines, and our intestines are actually really, really cool. Then we have to get it out, because there's things we ingest that we don't need, and what goes in must come out eventually, and that brings us to defecation, or egestation, which is what goes in must come out. So everything poops. If it's alive, it goes to the bathroom. It's just the way it is. You don't see, rocks going to the bathroom. If you do, you may check your water because somebody spiked it. Anyway, or your food. Anyway, so main organs: mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. We also have accessory organs, saliva glands, liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. Remember him? I told you he's going to be spoken about again. He's back because he's both an exocrine and an endocrine gland. And so we get to talk about him one more time with feeling. Anyway, so our tube has layers, and the tube, depending on where it is, has different thicknesses to these layers, but pretty much something that I like to show in if you were taking the actual lab with me is slides showing every part, like the esophagus, basically cross sections of each part, and you'll see over and over again, wow, these layers all look very similar no matter where you're at, if you're in the esophagus or the small intestine. So they all have these layers. So first, if you start in the middle with the lumen, which is that open area where basically everything, the chewed up food goes, which actually has a name. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Actually, when you chew up food, it isn't just that chewed up food stuff. It actually has a scientific name. So, when you have a kid or a younger sibling go nah at you with what they've chewed up, yeah, you can actually call it by its actual name, which is the bolus. The bolus. We'll get there. So anyway, you got the lumen here, and then surrounding that is the mucosa. So this is the surface epithelium. It has glands that secrete mucus and digestive enzymes. And in some spots it's folded, which is usually your small intestine and your large intestine. This folding is like folded on folded on folded on folded. So not only do you see these ridges right here, now imagine zooming in and there's even more ridges on the ridges, and then zooming in again, there's even ridges on those ridges. Yeah, if you unfolded the entirety of your small intestine, it is the size of a tennis court. Yeah, that's how much space is actually folded up in your small intestine right now. The entire size of a tennis court. I mean, I'm looking at my stomach, and even though I'm a bit chubby-wubby, I'm dang. Anyway, So the submucosa is loose connective tissue, supplies the mucosa with nourishment and takes all the absorbed materials away and shoves it into the our bloodstream for it to go around and around and around and around to get to the rest of the cells that are going, I need glucose, especially your brain. Your brain is always hangry, which is why you get hangry. I don't know. I come from, like, my mom, I don't know how, she can just run on no food forever and be fine. And then, like, if I miss lunch, I am the crankiest woman on God's green earth. And I swear I get that from my grandpa, because him and me, we cannot miss, or we get hangry. Anyway, now I need some water. All right, so muscularis externa, or the muscularis. So basically, this is smooth muscles and encircles the entire tube, and it does this wave movement called peristalsis, and we'll get to that in a minute. Then you got the serosus, or serous layer. So this is the outer layer of your tube that goes through your body, and is basically more epithelium, lubricates and protects the tube, as well as lets other organs slide freely against each other, so that way you don't have any rubbing on the inside of your body while you're swallowing things down. Because, yeah, nobody likes that. That's why the inside, again, we have fat. It lubricates, not only to keep everything flexible and flowing, but it also protects and makes sure we don't get chafing between organs, because everything's pretty packed in there. So yay. So again, yay fat, just yay not a lot of fat. All right, so remember when I said there was that movement? Yeah. So there's two types of movements happening inside your alimentary canal. And the first is your mixing movements, and this is usually your stomach, and it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You can actually feel this, like if you eat way too much. I don't know if you've ever had a Thanksgiving where you could literally lay there and be like, I've eaten too much, but you can feel your stomach actually kind of trying to chug along like a off-balance washing machine or dryer. And then you got segmentation, which happens in the small intestine. So it's kind of like segmentation. You can almost kind of think of it kind of like, a worm moving along or anything, except it's your small intestine. And he's not a worm. He's kind of important. Anyway, and then you've got propelling movements, which is going one way, which is either up or down. Preferably it's down. Up is only when we have emergencies. The stomach had an emergency, and we're going to be talking about that. So we do actually, it's kind of like a wave, if you've ever been to a sports game or whatnot, and somebody in the stands starts a wave, and everybody gets up, and you see a wave of people standing with their arms, and it goes around. That's what peristalsis is, but imagine it's a wave going, pushing everything down. So it's a ring of contraction that starts after you swallow and pretty much moves down into your stomach. And so it's just, and peristalsis actually does go all the way through. It's just it stops at certain places. Now, those certain places are called sphincter muscles. We actually have very strong rings of muscles that prevent the regurgitation of foods, unless you're having major issues with like acid reflux and whatnot. And these are found between the organs. So these sphincter muscles are kind of like cutoff points, and you're going to see this when we go through the alimentary canal, how many different sphincter cutoff points we have, because there's a lot of times we really don't want it going back the other way, especially when it comes to defecation. We do not want that going in reverse. That is a no-go. But if your stomach's upset, the sphincter muscle between your stomach and your esophagus, that definitely can reverse and occasionally purge your stomach. So that one's allowed reversible, even though it's no fun for anybody. But peristalsis is usually going one way, like a wave, pushing everything down. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we have checkpoints, the sphincter muscles between certain points, so that way things can't go backwards and harm us. So he goes over this. He does mention Alexis St. Martin. He doesn't go over all the insane details like I did, but I like to go over the insane details. So let's go ahead and start our great journey through the digestive system. So we go nom nom with your mouth, which is the oral cavity or the buccal cavity, referred to our mouth. So we have our cheeks and our roots, which are stratified squamous epithelium. So in other words, this layer falls off very easily, and is just layers of squamous epithelium, so very thin plates of cells, and it's always sloughing off. That's normal. That's how we protect ourselves. And then we have our tongue, and we'll get into tongue stuff in a minute. I mean, like taste buds and whatnot. It's actually kind of interesting because there's a lot of misconceptions about how we taste, and we'll get there in a minute. So it's covered in mucous membrane. The lingual frenulum connects to the floor of the mouth. That's this thing right here. That little string. I got a funny story about that. Covered in polypi, which is for friction, so we can get a grip on our food, and for taste. The root is anchored to our hyoid bone down here, and it is covered in lingual tonsils, which is part of what we just learned about earlier, is part of your lymphatic system. Now, this frenulum right here, my son was actually born with one that literally went up to the tip of his tongue. So the tip of his tongue was actually, he was literally born tongue-tied. That's what they call tongue-tied, is the frenulum goes to the tip of the tongue. He couldn't nurse very well because of it, and he still had issues with it. I had to do a hybrid of pumping and breastfeeding. It was interesting. Anyway, we can get into that later. But anyway, so we went to the pediatrician, we went to the doctors, and we sat there and we had a long discussion, because it's like, do we cut it? Do we not cut it? Because there's some people that don't have it, they're born without it, and they can do that really long tongue thing, like Gene Simmons. And maybe Wes can too in the future, I don't know. But anyway, long story short, we finally decided to cut it because we thought that it would impair his speech in the future, and we didn't really want that. I mean, it was already getting in the way of him nursing correctly. It was like half him, half me. Like I said, I'll get into that when we talk about going through pregnancy and growth and everything. So, because, gotta talk about all the weird things. Anyway, long story short with cheese, sorry about that. Anyway, so we had to cut his, and he's been fine ever since, and he can talk just fine. Trust me, if I got him in here, there's a reason why I come here during the day to get some of my lectures done, because, he likes to come up and occasionally say hello. And maybe I'll let him in the future, but, he's 9. Anyway, palate, which is a hard anterior, soft posterior, has the uvula. Test question. I just like saying uvula. It's that hangy downy bit. Yeah, there's a test question on it. It just says, what is the uvula? No, I think it has something a little bit. It's about the uvula. Anyway, and then more tonsils. So you got your palatine tonsils, which help fight infections, and your pharyngeal tonsils, or also known as your adenoids. And those are the ones that usually get removed. Like I said, when we were talking about that, I believe I mentioned my younger brother. He actually had to have his removed because his were so swollen and huge, he couldn't breathe as a baby. And he would literally be choking at night, and my mother would apparently be up all night just freaking out, and finally she brought him to the doctor, because she never had a problem with me, apparently, except for the fact that I cried for 3 months straight, or maybe it was a month, I need to double check, but I was a pretty healthy, robust baby, and then my bro came out, and he was the opposite, so it was just kind of throwing her for a loop. And then she became an EMT paramedic and saved many, many lives. She's an amazing woman. Now she's going and getting recertified in CPR next week. Anyway, so speaking of teeth, which we haven't been until now, but now we are. So anyway, humans have 2 sets of teeth in their lifetime: deciduous teeth, you have 20, and the permanent teeth, secondary, which are 32. And the major teeth groups include the incisors, the cuspids, the bicuspids, and the molars. And basically what they're doing is, they break down food by increasing the surface area and letting the enzymes get at it better. So this is just manual breaking it down. Funny story. Just last week, my son's losing his teeth. His deciduous teeth. That's why it's called deciduous, because it's named after, like, deciduous trees, which drop their leaves every fall. That's why they're called deciduous teeth. Fun. He walked up to me, and he goes, "Mom, And I'm like, yes, sweetie. He goes, I need you to take my tooth out. It's bothering me and I can't eat my bagel. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, right here, one of his teeth was really, really loose. And apparently he didn't want to do it himself. So I'd never done this before. I reached in and like twisted it a little bit and yoinked it and it came right out. And he was like, oh, thank you. And he goes back, sits down for a minute, and eats his bagel. So that was interesting. I swear to God, having kids is a trip. It's not for everybody. I'm going to say that. Not everybody needs kids. I'm not one of them. When are you having kids? It's so annoying. If you don't want kids, don't have kids. But they're weird. They are weird little things. Fun story also. A lot of mammals, their lives are actually connected to their teeth, which is why I'm always surprised that dentistry and doctor, medical stuff is not more integrated, because teeth show a lot of signs of other health issues. They're very much integrated. And you can see this with like all animals. Once they lose their permanent teeth or they start rotting out and losing those, that's pretty much the end of their lifespan. You see this with lions. It's like once they get too old and their teeth are gone, they're pretty much dead in the water. They get ousted by their own family group and their own pride, and they die. Elephants actually have 6 teeth sets they go through, and once they hit that 6th set, that's pretty much it, and they die again. You need teeth to eat. So for us mammals, once we're out of teeth, we're usually dead. That's associated with our lifespan. So how long you keep your teeth, or how many sets of teeth you go through. Now, reptiles, on the other hand, don't have this issue like Monty. He can just lose a tooth and a new one grows in. A lot of, that's pretty much most reptiles. I used to have an entire bag of, when I was working at the zoo with the alligators, they have nothing but teeth, and I actually had a thing of alligator teeth that I just pick up randomly when I was cleaning out the pool that they all like to swim in. And I don't know where it went. Somewhere during the move, I lost all my alligator teeth, and I'm bummed, because that was cool. And I could sit there and go, look at my alligator teeth. But now I have a little thing that's filled with my son's teeth, and I go, look at my little baby's teeth. Because, mothers, we're weird. Okay, so that's the top half. Now we're going to get into the act of swallowing next time, and going into the stomach and the small intestines and the large intestines and what it absorbs and how it absorbs it. And then bile, which, if you throw up, you taste bile, and it's terrible. So that's what we're going to hit on next time in part 2 of your digestive system, or chapter 17. So I'll see you in just a minute. Bye!